T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast, episode 76, and today I've got with me another big combat veteran and Star Citizen YouTuber, JoHnathan Winters. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. What's up, everybody?
Thank you for coming in, man. We got some good stuff planned for today. There's a lot of talk going on around PvP and combat and stuff, and I know you've recently gotten into starting to teach more on your channel. I've also seen your cinematic videos, which are really, really nice.
Yeah, thanks, man. Those are fun to make.
Yeah, those are beautiful. If you haven't seen them, check them out. But I don't want to do all of the introductions and stuff. Why don't I pass it to you and you tell everybody kind of what content you're making on YouTube and what you're focusing on and maybe where they can find that stuff.
Yeah, so I mostly focus on PvP. I've been playing around for a couple of years in Star Citizen. I originally started with Black Fleet, which was like one of the first knife fighting communities. And from there, it's just grown to jumping around to different communities depending on, which ones go up and down since, everybody gets tired of the game eventually and move on.
Yep.
But I've always stayed in PvP and I've always loved it and I think it's fun. That's why I do a lot of the content that I do.
So how long have you been playing the game?
On and off for maybe 7 years.
7 years. So you've been around.
Yeah, I mostly played in 3.14, which combat back then was like Quake Wars. It was very like you had to snap around and be quick. Where now we've gone to much slower speeds, which is fast to a lot of players, but compared to what we used to have, it's slow.
Yeah, and the combat model ever since you were there before the whole 3.0 refactor and how everything changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you playing then?
Yeah.
So are you one of the people who believes that it was at its best back then?
No, I think these changes have been great. The twitchy combat is very high skill ceiling. Like it makes casuals not want to play at all. It was way too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where we're going is much better.
Okay. What were you playing before Star Citizen? Were you doing spaceflight simulation combat? Like, how'd you get into that?
I started with Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Okay.
That was years ago.
Like the old ones or this newest?
Yeah.
I guess that wouldn't make sense.
It started
if it was
with
the
those
newest one.
kind of games. That's what got me into flight and those kind of things. And from there, we went into Elite Dangerous. And then eventually Star Citizen when it came out, but that was about it. And yeah, that's it. Been here since.
And you weren't doing any like YouTube for that kind of stuff back then. You just what got you into starting to make videos then?
I've always loved gaming, man. There's never been a game where I'm like, I feel like I could play this for a long time. And this was the first game that I'm like, you know what? I feel like we could do this with this. Like this feels like a fun game, yet there's so much to like learn and keep learning from it.
Yeah. That
I think it'll be fun to keep doing.
I get that. Feels like a long-term, like that was kind of how I was. I sat on this game for a long time and eventually I was like, this game, I've loved games before. Halo, BioShock, Fable, Mass Effect, but like none of those games felt like something I could invest a bunch of years into making videos for. But yeah, Star Citizen definitely feels like the kind of thing that you could just keep making content and it wouldn't go dry.
Yeah, I agree.
So all of your learning how to dogfight the way that you do and the way that you teach it, you've learned that in Star Citizen itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything has been Star Citizen. And I mean, like, if you try to play any game and bring it over to Star Citizen, nothing translates. This game is so unique in the way flight models work that it doesn't work.
That's actually something I was going to ask a little bit later, but we'll bring it up now. Is you said you haven't really done much of the dogfighting in other games, maybe Elite Dangerous, a little bit of that, but like from what you've seen of other games, does it feel like Star Citizen is actually developing its own identity when it comes to dogfighting?
I think so. I think it's a little complicated because we don't really know what they're doing. Like, sure, they've given us ideas like the master modes and whatnot, but like a lot of these things, it's very easy to theorize ideas of what it's going to play out to be like. But we really don't know until we get it on our hands.
Right. And
there's too many factors.
And things are changing nonstop. We just saw another update we saw another update to combat speeds, but we're also now hearing that they're rebalancing weapons in the upcoming patch. So that's interesting. When it comes to
they love throwing this stuff out of nowhere, which is the crazy part because like one day you have stealth, the next day you don't. And now everybody's like,
Yeah.
what the hell's going on? And they never give you anything.
Yep. Yeah. And the whole the meta conversation is always changing.
Yeah.
So when it comes to getting into, I guess I want to take a step back. Let me talk about it from my perspective, getting into combat. I'll jump into like your occasional bounties. I'll check out, whatever Hurston's throwing at you for your VLRTs or your VRTs or whatever. And I'll work my way up some PvE stuff. But when it comes to PvP, and even when it comes to higher level PvE, when the servers aren't lagging like crazy, it starts to feel really overwhelming and intimidating really quickly. Was there something that you did when you started learning how to fight in this game that helped you kind of like slow down and not freak out every time you get into a fight? Because I feel like that's the biggest barrier to entry of people getting into this stuff.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. I run my own Discord, and a lot of it is training focused and like learning how to move and whatnot. And a lot of the times, what I get is people who they felt so overwhelmed by just trying to get out of a hangar, and it's difficult, right? Because like imagine coming to this game and you've never played a flight sim, you've never done anything related to flight, and all of a sudden you're expected to be able to navigate around the verse. It's incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I can say is always take it slow, one step at a time. Like find what it is you suck at and get better at it little by little. And it's you can't try to like do things that are complicated like circle strafes, barrel roll maneuvers, things like that when you don't even know how to hover properly.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of like knowing where to start is a big one. We talked a little bit about getting started, and you told me about this sort of technique of using an asteroid and making sure it's its own, like picturing it as its own ship, orbiting around it, getting a sense of that control. Is that like a good first step, or what would you say is the first thing somebody should do if they want to try and start fighting?
Yeah, once you've identified how to move your ship, period, like even if you crash into things, that's fine. Orbiting is the first step. Like being able to orbit something is crucial in Star Citizen. Once you can orbit anything in a smooth pattern, you'll be able to do pretty much anything in Star Citizen.
Yeah.
And it's something that's very easy to develop little by little because there's ways of implementing certain things little by little. Like for example, the first thing you would do is just try moving from left to right, and then that's easy. What is it on keyboard? AD. So all you would have to do is move to one side and then try to adjust a little bit of forward input on your ship so that you can keep it in front of whatever you're trying to orbit.
So this is, I think, kind of combat that applies to a one-on-one dogfight with a ship that's similar to yours. One thing that hasn't really started happening in Star Citizen yet is kind of mixed ship battles. We saw a little bit of it with Xenothreat, and really that's the main place you get it. I think, yeah, I don't think you get to fight many big ships when it comes to Ninetales Lockdown. That's starting to get into theoretical territory, but have you thought about how that's going to change up your combat flow and the way that you go into battles when they have capital ships nearby, or corvettes or destroyers or frigates, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think this is why the speed change is huge. Even though we don't really know a lot of what's going to happen really when we get it, we do know for a fact that because we're going to have slower speeds, we're going to have less desync, and we're going to have less issues for ships that have turret systems. Turret systems are going to change everything. You're not going to be able to have a light fighter and just harass, a hammerhead forever, because we'll no longer be able to maintain this range where we can shoot it and it can't shoot us. And now we're going to have to get into a danger zone when we try to shoot it. This is where things like vanguards will be more appropriate to use against something like a hammerhead. So you'll start to see people piloting more hammerheads mixed with light fighters to defend those vanguards. And that's where we'll start to see a lot of influx of different ships being used.
It's going to be interesting to see the way that changes things, because right now I'll see a big ship and in my mind I'm like, yeah, that's a javelin. That thing's pretty, like, you want to be careful when you're around that, but I'm not scared of it. And it's going to be interesting to see how the game changes when you see a big ship and you automatically are like, I'm not going near that at all. See how that kind of changes the zone of defense, or the zone of power that you get. I'm also interested in seeing how people might strategize, because I've never seen people strategize in Star Citizen. There's never been a reason to,
It depends. It depends. Because if you okay, so sometimes we'll have like events where we do like 30 versus 30 or 30 versus 100, depending on what org is playing with what.
Hmm.
30-70, I mean. Um, and we'll usually give an objective, like we'll fight over a specific station in the middle of a planet. When you have these high numbers, strategy matters because you have to watch out for ballistas. You have to watch out for bombers, torpedoes. There's a lot more to fight over. The current issue is for the average player where we're just kind of going through space. I mean, you're going to run into 4 people max, right? And we're not fighting for an objective. We're fighting for just nothing, just to fight.
Yeah.
So there's no strategy. You just go in, shoot each other, and get out. Whereas if like Jumptown, you already start to see a little bit more strategy. That's where you start to see people using ballistas, A2s, and you have people who get upset because all of a sudden they're dying instantly because they weren't ready for somebody coming in with an A2 or coming in with a bunch of heavy fighters, things like that.
That's true. Yeah, and I have started to see some of that when it comes to things like Jumptown. What I what I'm curious about is because for me, I don't get much of an idea of like the scale or distances that I get from other ships. I think that's actually something I struggle with a lot when I'm dogfighting is that I have a difficult time putting myself in the space and saying, okay, I'm moving towards or away from the ship I'm fighting. They're moving in this direction. That's why, the angles are changing this way. It's hard to put yourself in that 3D space. And that's again what I think of when I think of the sort of larger ship battles and strategizing. Are you going to have two groups of ships sitting at 5 kilometers from each other and like sending small strike parties in at each other, or is it just going to be a big cluster of ships fighting, or has it go out? Because we all kind of imagine like the Star Wars style of battling, but in reality, it could look a lot different from that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say I'm leaning towards clusters, and it comes down to communication and how good the team is.
Hmm.
Because again, average pilots like from a random org that maybe have 30 people, but they don't put in the time to train. They probably just go randomly scatter in there, try to shoot shit and do whatever they can.
Right.
But if you fight someone who's a lot more team oriented, they'll probably bring in something big and they'll try to use it to poke at the enemy. And then when people try to harass it, they'll swarm with the light fighters, take that out, and try to defend and move around together rather than just randomly. So I think space combat in the future is going to be very picking apart the opponent little by little.
Hmm. You think there's going to be a
You
lot
could
of? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was gonna say you could go in and just swarm, but I think that will be less effective against certain teams depending on how they play and what
Yeah.
compositions they have.
That kind of leads into what I was going to ask, which was, do you think there's going to be a big discrepancy between groups who are meeting each other in the verse in terms of like people just getting completely wiped out by other groups that are always training?
I think so. I think the skill ceiling in this game is always going to remain high just because there's so many elements to it.
Hmm.
But I think numbers are going to matter more eventually. For example, I mean, no matter how good you get, if you have 300 hammerheads, what are you going to do against that? Like, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think that's where numbers will be more valuable.
You said just now there are a lot of elements to the fighting in this game and kind of wrapping your head around combat. Can you talk a little bit more about those different elements? If you could break out kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
different areas of skill that somebody might need.
Yeah, I actually wanted to. I was thinking about that when you were saying it's hard to get like a spatial awareness for these things, right?
Hmm.
That comes with time, but what the first thing I wanted to do with a lot of my videos is I was focusing on trying to create a way where I can find a tool in the game that allows you to understand these vector changes without having to really like visually think about it, without having any experience. That's where I learned that using your lead pip can help you do that. Um, there's something that I do in
Can
my
you?
videos. It's called,
Sorry,
yeah.
just for everybody to understand, what exactly is a pip?
So the pip is a little targeting reticle that pops up in front of your ship when you target another ship. You'll see that little box that kind of goes in front of your ship, and
Hmm.
you'll see it kind of move around, and it's what you have to aim at. If you use lag pip, it's a little bit different. You usually get that little pip, and you have to move it on top of the ship. Lead pip is the other way around.
Okay.
You can use both. They both give you the exact same information, but I prefer lead pip. I think it's a little bit easier to understand vector with it.
Okay.
And a lot of my videos focus on using that tool to help you find spatial awareness. And we do it by teaching things like pip evasion, pip neutralization. It's just things that allow you to kind of understand how the pip's manipulation and movement around the ship is giving you information about where you're headed and where the opponent is headed.
Okay. So a lot of times, especially as a beginner, you're looking at the HUD, you're getting an idea of what everything stands for, and you see those two kind of G-force indicators down in the corners. That would naturally be where you're looking to understand what is my ship doing at the moment. But if you
No, stay away from that thing.
Okay. Yeah, so
That thing is for aliens, man. I don't know who understands the G-force thing.
well, when you have another ship with you, suddenly you basically have an indicator is what you're saying, using the pip as a way to understand what your own ship is doing.
Yeah, correct. You
Okay.
can use the pip, kind of gives you G-forces in a way, sort of. It's a little complicated, but it's not. It's very simple. I'll give you guys like a very simple rundown of it. Whenever you're flying and you lock onto the target and the pip falls right on top of the ship, like it is literally hovering on the enemy ship, that means there is no relative motion between the both of you.
Yeah.
That means that if you were to both look at each other, even if you're going 800 meters a second in one direction, you're both looking, it looks like you're both sitting still.
Yeah.
And then the movement of that pip shows you the change of velocity and direction.
Mm-hmm. So you can kind of use that to understand, are they moving from or rather towards or away from you, left or right, things like that.
Yep.
So
exactly.
That's kind of one segment of a beginner's understanding of how these expressions of combat work. Is there something else that they should be keeping in mind, say like distance from the other ship, how you should change your style of fighting based on your distance?
Yeah, one of the big things I've seen a lot of people do, that especially people who come from other flight games or DCS, Elite Dangerous even, people are always talking about the merge, which for anybody who doesn't know, merging is when you and another opponent pass each other. It's wherever you intersect in space and you pass one another and then turn around to pass each other again. In space, you don't really want to merge. The goal is to stop before you merge and then acquire target and push shots on the target. And the way you stay evasive is doing things like pip evasion, which is using that pip's knowledge or information to kind of make it move around in a way that makes it hard for them to shoot you.
So you want to always stay as far away as you want then?
You can. Distance is safety. If we're talking about the current meta, usually about 1,200 is the safe spot. So anywhere in there, and if you strafe to either direction, it's going to be very hard for them to apply damage. When you start getting into like 800 to 500, that's more of a mid-range combat zone. That's kind of where it relies more on something called circle strafes, which some people know as corkscrews. The difference is a circle strafe is making a circle in space, while a corkscrew is having that circle either go forward or back.
Mm-hmm.
In close range, we're talking to 300 to 100 meters, even zero. But zero is basically a merge. 100 meters to 300 meters is called knife fighting. In this category, we're talking more about evasion, and it's kind of what CAG has kind of hinted at, bringing more to the table of what the flight model changes. They want life fighters to push each other close, and they want people to knife fight, which becomes more about using kind of like drifting around corners in racing games. You drift around other ships and you change directions on them to kind of make them fumble and trip and get behind them and shoot at them while they're incapable of shooting at you.
Okay. So these are definitely different. It sounds like kind of three different types of combat that you can engage in. Sort of more predictive, far range versus medium range. How would you characterize medium range? If short range is knife fighting very quick and long range is kind of you get a little bit of space breathing room, but you can still land some shots. What is that medium range mainly used for?
Yeah. For anybody who wants to see this displayed, I did make a video on it. It's called Combat Styles on my channel.
Cool.
And basically, you have three things. You have the jabber, which is the long distance guy. What his goal is to stay at like 1,200. And then what he tries to do is kind of bait some shots and then back strafe on the opponent so that the guy is shooting at you and he's missing because he's too long distance. It's never going to connect. And then once that opponent is starting to run out of ammo, you kind of close the distance a little bit, you do some damage, and then you rinse and repeat. Medium range is something I like to call the funnel. This is something that was coined by Avenger 1. It's fighting in the funnel, which basically it comes down to a lot of circle strafe combat. So what he'll have you do is you stay in that range, you do these circle strafes, and you invert them in other directions to stay evasive. This is it's very difficult, but it's not once you understand again the pip, because the pip can kind of help you understand if you're doing the circle correct or not. The third one, the knife fighting, is again close range.
Okay. So different types of fighting. Are these all things that you think are going to survive sort of the reworks of different types of like we're not all going to get pushed into fighting the exact same way every time, right?
It's hard to say again because we don't really have those elements to play with. So
Sure.
it's really hard. But I think these elements will always exist. I think you'll always have long, medium, and close. What I think is going to happen is medium and long range is going to be harder to maintain because of the reverse being less effective. So we'll have to rely more on saving boost to maintain those distances. But again, they'll be much faster going forward. So it's something we're going to have to kind of play with and figure out.
Okay. The last, I guess, part of this equation of getting new people more informed about what the basics of combat, I think would be the ships, in my opinion. And that is, we have light, medium, heavy fighters. If somebody was looking to get into new types of combat in Star Citizen, what would you point them towards each? And this is something that's changing right now as CIG themselves are kind of changing the definition and roles of these fighters. But as it is right now, how would you point people towards each of those ships based on how they wanted to fight? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So light fighters are all about knife fighting. You want to push in, you want to do damage. Sometimes it's impossible to do that against other light fighters because medium is so powerful right now, medium range. But let's go to medium fighters. Medium fighters are support craft. They are very effective, but you cannot solo in them. Their goal is to help the light fighters pick apart another light fighters. For example, say you have a 3 versus 3. You have 3 light fighters versus 2 light fighters and 1 medium fighter. While the 2 light fighters continue putting pressure, the medium's job is to come in and finish that other ship off. They can tank a lot more damage and they can move very fast forward and back, so it's very easy for them to engage and disengage from combat. The heavy fighter, his job is to nuke light fighters and medium fighters. The reason heavy fighters have taken a hit right now is because turrets just suck right now, and it has to do with the desync. Like, a light fighter can be right in front of your face and your turret will just not connect.
Okay.
That's an issue, and it's something that needs to get fixed. But when that does get fixed, light fighters are going to be incredibly powerful. The turrets are strong enough to keep light fighters, useless basically, and it has very strong cannons to deal with medium and heavy fighters.
It's really exciting when you get to break it down like this. When I go into a battle, like I'll go and jump in. I never really go into anything that's organized. I think our org probably needs to start stepping up on this stuff. But when I jump into a battle with some friends and some ships, I never even pay attention to like what ships anybody's in or what we're doing. And it's interesting to, look into you guys who get more into the PvP and the combat stuff and realize how much your head is on a swivel and you're constantly recalculating what's going on. Because if I wasn't a medium fighter, I'd be like, well, I'll just shoot at this guy and hopefully somebody else finishes him off.
Yeah, it's very team oriented, and still people right now favor just a bunch of light fighters because they're just so they can push the fight wherever they want so easily.
Yeah.
But a good Super Hornet pilot will do some damage. I mean, I go out in Sabers, which are horrible medium ships, and I destroy light fighters all the time. You have to, combat is not easy, and there's a big skill gap. Like most people that run into a warden, or let me change that. Most light fighters that run into a warden will destroy a warden. But if you put a good pilot behind that warden, the warden will win every single time. And the fact is because even if we do 2 versus 2, because two people in the warden, so 1 in the turret, 1 in the warden, and 2 light fighters, the warden will win every single time if it wasn't for desync. Because again, that turret and being able to understand how to evade the light fighter's push and keep him kind of locked at that medium range, you'll obliterate him. Like he won't be able to close the gap on you enough to stop you.
Could this be a problem? I mean, I know I've talked to a lot of people who play PvP, and I've had Avenger 1 on here a couple of times, and he is very strongly of the idea that everybody should be taught and able to defend them. But the more and more I learn about combat and how deep it can get and how much strategy can be involved when you have multiple numbers, I realize no matter how much training you have, you could find yourself in a very bad position very quickly.
Yeah. No, I don't feel that way.
No.
I think it's crazy to think everybody wants to play PvP. Some people don't care. Some people don't want to combat. They want to be haulers. They want to be miners.
Yeah.
They want nothing to do with PvP. But what I think everybody needs to learn how to do is run away. And it's something that's very easy to teach. And it's something that honestly anybody can learn it. The first thing you have to understand is distance, which is kind of hard to understand, right? But once you understand distance, getting away becomes very easy.
Are you of the belief that it should be easy to get away, or there should just be the opportunity to get away?
I think there should be the opportunity to get away. Okay, here's the thing. Right now, it is extremely easy to get away, no matter what you're in. And it has to do with reaction times, how much health we have, and how easy it is to quantum away. Like, there's always a way to get out. It's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The issue we're going to have in the future is they said that they want to make interceptors stop you from entering quantum mode, which is what's going to let you warp away and get away.
Mm-hmm.
So if a fleet comes with a light fighter and an interceptor and you don't know how to kind of evade and push past them, you're never going to get away. But I think it will become a skill thing. It will become you'll need less skill to be able to escape from people, but you'll still need skill, or else you're just going to be easily picked apart from the interceptor and light fighter.
I wonder how they're going to make sure people get that skill. There's no tutorial now, but
no,
even a basic tutorial that you would go through at the like, for instance, what they put you through at the beginning of Elite Dangerous, I don't see that being enough to prepare people for the kind of situations you could get in a game
it's not
like this.
And I mean, I think their focus is what I'm hoping for. I mean, and they've said this, and I know they take a lot of inspiration from EVE Online, which is like a space MMO.
Mm-hmm.
What they want is areas of high security and low security.
Right.
So if you hang around these high security areas, you should be safe. You know, the AI should come in, they should help you. Right now, AI are garbage. If they come to help you, you're screwed. There's nothing they're going to do for you.
If they come to help you, there's a pretty good chance they'll end up shooting you, or you shoot at them and get a crime set or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're horrible right now. But the hope is that, when these speeds get fixed, turrets become much more powerful. A bunch of pirates start attacking you. Maybe you can go hug the friendly hammerhead, get close to him, and he'll protect you a bit.
Yeah. It's always hard to remember that there are a lot of things that are going to change: the restricted areas, the amount of security, the reputation system, law. And a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, you say that idealistically that's going to fix the problem, but what's really going to happen? And I guess none of us really know. People can be evil. That's what I know. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all turns out when this stuff starts to matter and combat starts to make a difference, and we all have different systems that we're trying to play in.
Yeah, correct. I mean, when people start making money from killing players, which is, I think, much needed, because, I mean, sure, we don't want pirates to exist, right? But, like, there are also players that want to enjoy the game, and there has to be something for them to do. Right now, really, there's nothing for them to do except kill people for no reason and go to jail. The issue is, if you have these security zones, right, and let's say they work, like, let's just put that, you're still going to have players that will come in with 30 freaking people, and they'll just kill everything. They'll kill all the security, they'll kill everybody at the station, and then get out. But they won't be able to loot anything because it'll be a bunch of security everywhere stopping them from looting. That's still going to exist, I think. But it's just part of the game. Like, we have to know that we're going to die. It's a game where you're going to die a lot. And because we have things like insurance and things of that nature, death isn't going to be that big of a deal.
Well,
whereas in like Elite Dangerous, I'm not Elite Dangerous, I'm sorry. In EVE Online, when you died in that game, you lost everything. Like, there's no insurance. Your ship is gone. You get like a little tiny paycheck for your lost ship, but everything's gone, dude. And people would lose millions in seconds in that game.
They're trying though with this game. Death of a Spaceman, the idea that your character has however many deaths before you permanently lose the character. You lose stuff that's not insured. They're adding a lot of consequences to dying. So I don't think that this is going to be a game that we should at least be expecting to die a lot in. But that's kind of that's why the questions start to pop up of how it's going to work. If, especially like you said, there are still groups of people who get 30 of their friends together and come and raid a space station that normally is a player safe, beginner level zone.
Yep. And I think, look, we have to kind of like think about it like you're playing Halo. I'm sure a
Ooh,
lot of people here have played that game, and you have to play Halo for the first time. You've never played an FPS game, but the only game mode you can play in is Legendary. You're gonna die a lot.
jeez.
you're you're gonna die a lot of freaking times, and it's just part of you. Either learn to play the game little by little and get better at it, or you get tired of it and move on.
Yeah, well, that second one is dangerous to the game's health, but
It is very dangerous.
yeah, this is not a game, and this is something that I've noticed a lot more recently. A lot of people don't understand what kind of game they're trying to make here. They see things like resource management or death of a spaceman or even updates coming to the flight model, and they're like, this is too much. Like, this is making the game way too difficult.
I
And
think
you,
so.
you realize a lot of players aren't looking for that kind of more hardcore experience and didn't realize that this game is trying to do that.
Yeah, most people don't want that. I mean, look at EVE Online. It's been around for years, and I think they had like an average player base of 40, 50,000. Like that's nothing crazy. It's whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's where balancing security zones is going to be massive. I think players should have an environment where they can play and not really feel like they're in danger constantly. Maybe every once in a while, sure, but not like all the time.
Yeah.
And I think we should have our systems for people who really want the action and really want to have a lot of danger and reward. And that's where we have systems like Pyro.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Kind of seems like where they're going. And there's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a ton of balance behind that. Jeez, I can't even. It's going to be crazy how much they have to balance the different systems against each other.
Yeah, it's going to be very hard.
Let's go
But I
back.
think they could do it. There's a lot of ways to do it. They should be aight.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think EVE Online did it great. I think EVE Online just kept a lot of players away because of the difficulty and the learning pattern of it, like how much you had to learn to even do anything in that game.
Yeah, it also got a bad reputation.
Yes,
And
it
that's
did. Yeah.
something that I think Star Citizen is going to have to start really focusing on dealing with. Recently, the way the community has started to discourse together has been a little more intense than in the past, I think. And yeah, I think we got to start to kind of knock that down. But overall, I think this game is in a way better place to attract more people than Eve did, if nothing
Yeah, I
else, than
think
for
so
that
too.
first person.
Yeah, there's nothing like this game. We all come back because I mean, look, I've been playing since 2013. Not really playing because all we had was a hangar view at that time, right?
Mhm.
But like, all I did was come in, check out my Aurora and its little hangar, run at 5 FPS, and leave. And I was like, that was awesome.
Were
You
you
know?
were you doing? Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Were you a Kickstarter backer or just back in 2013?
No,
or-
just backwards, straight off. As soon as it got off of Kickstarter, I'm like, all right, it's a real thing. Let's do this, and that's when I
Cool.
put my money into it.
Cool. Yeah. There's a lot of us still
But-
around. I'm happy to see
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, that's why, because it's so unique, right? Like, there's nothing like this game, and there probably won't be anything like this game for who knows how long, man. Probably like 25 years or more.
I mean,
It's
this.
just, this kind of game is not easy to make.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If they've proven anything, it's that like nobody wants to do a game like this.
Yeah, nobody wants this job, man. It is not easy. And it's crazy because, like, we're mostly focused on PvP, but let's the development, like, everybody's really upset right now, right, with how long everything's taken. Rightly so. Like, there's a lot of things they could add to, like, kind of help in the meantime.
Mhm.
Like, it can't be that hard to freaking do like a King of the Hill version in space, right? Like, it's got to be easy to code that. Yet
that's
they
what we
refuse
say.
to do anything like that.
Yeah, we there's a lot of stuff that I feel like we say that about, and like I personally feel that way about stuff. Like it can't be that hard to just raise the amount of commodities so we can start seeing people actually trade. But then when you start to stack up the pages and pages and pages of it can't be that hard to do this and this and this, it's like, well, what did
Yeah,
they do?
exactly. It
And-
adds up.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is too is you got to look at Chris Roberts and what he's doing, right? Like he doesn't want to do the basic thing. He doesn't want to do a King of the Hill. He wants cargo to be a real item so we can steal it from a ship after we destroy it and demolish it. And he doesn't want the ship to have an HP pool. He wants every single component to have an HP pool, and then you can target single individual factors to disable the ship in a certain specific way. Like there's just they're over engineering the game because they have so many roles in the game that they want to fulfill. be playable, and they need all those systems in place in place before any of that is added to the game.
Yeah. It's like wanting to make a King of the Hill game, but then needing to make like a procedural system for defining what kings are, and then making like
Yeah,
a bunch of
exactly.
tools to help you make fancy hills and like all this
Yeah,
stuff.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's a lot, and that's part of what attracts people to the game. It's also part of what made the game take so long. Like they could have totally just made a dogfighting MMO in space, launched that in 2015, and then built off of it from there. Added cargo, and then a couple years later, salvage, and a couple years like that's always one of those what if sort of things. And think about them making it, but at the same time, everything that we've gone through, everything that we've done over the last 10 years have led to where the game is now. And I really like what the game is now. I don't like that it's that bloated from what it was before, but it's still exciting.
Yeah, I think the game is fun. It's fun till you learn it, and then once you learn it, it's boring again.
Yeah, because there's not enough.
Yeah, and that's normal. That's any game, right? Like you're always. That's why we don't play old games. Like they just you beat them, you learn them. You might revisit them again in a couple of years, but you eventually learn all the mechanics and you get bored of it.
Yeah. It's all about making that content that is replayable. And they've got some of that in Star Citizen, but yeah, it's very much lacking right now.
Yeah. Right now there's nothing. Hopefully soon. TM.
Gosh. Let's go back to the combat real quick. I have a question that I always want to ask combat people. Nobody knows this. I feel like this is what Chris wants from the game, but I don't know if it's possible to even have this in a video game. When I think of the perfect combat scenario in a space game, I remember, okay, maybe not perfect, but exciting, interesting, different. I think of Obi-Wan chasing Jango Fett, Star Wars Attack of the Clone Wars through the asteroid belt, and Jango's dropping bombs, and like it's that classic idea of, oh, we're just running this linear path through something and I'm shooting at you and trying to get shots and you're blocking me with asteroids. And they made a commercial about it for the Hornet, beginning of Star Citizen and stuff. But like, do you ever see that actually happening in this game?
I think it will, depending on where we fight, right? Like I think if they add more, like for example, if you're ever fighting Grimhex, like right around the asteroid belt, and you stay in that asteroid belt, you have to be more aware of your surroundings. Or like many people, we're gonna ram into a rock and die, and then the other person's still alive.
I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens to everybody. So I think it depends on the environments they craft, and I think that's gonna be a lot of the fun factor, right? Because like let's talk about like what they want to do with what's it called, VIP, and like basically being Boeing 747s and transporting passengers around.
Yeah.
That's going to get really boring if the environment drive isn't interactive and fun. Like, what if you have to take a guy in a planet from one side to the other side, and it's just going straight in a line all day? It gets boring.
Yeah.
But if you add things like pirates randomly coming at you, or maybe different weather patterns that you have to kind of dodge and evade, or maybe volcanic explosions, things that you have to be worried about, that's where these navigation gameplay mechanics get more entertaining. And I think it happens to PvP as well. If there's no environment to bounce off and use to your advantage, then we won't have anything fun to do in those environments.
Also kind of comes down to how people must think about the fighting, right? I mean, if there's a type of game where if somebody ends up behind you shooting at you, you would immediately freak out because you think you're going to die, versus the type of game where you think, okay, I got a couple of minutes to get this guy off of my tail and make more of this situation. Yep. So it got to kind of come down to the, I guess not really meta, but kind of the common belief of players in the game. And that,
yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that actually goes for things like just in getting into fights in general too. Having your guns always loaded if you see another player, versus seeing another player and understanding that in Star Citizen people don't immediately try to fight each other.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we're always going to be trying to fight each other. I think right now we are, because there's nothing else to do.
You think we'll be... I'm trying to think of what other games, because there's all these kinds of games where you come across somebody randomly, and like in certain games they would just shoot each other. Like you brought up Halo
Daisy.
Earlier. I would shoot someone if I saw them come up in Halo. And Daisy, like you said as well, Rust is kind of another one of those types of games. You think Star Citizen will lean a little bit more towards people just actually conversing and talking and not shooting?
I think it depends on where we take this environment, right? Because like I think in a high security zone that'll be more the case, more political, more talking, more chilling,
Hmm.
more working together. But if you go to Pyro, people want to PvP. That's what that place is going to be for.
Yeah.
And again, this comes with the security forces that we don't really know about. But I think there'll always be a reason not to kill players in the future. Currently, right now, there's no reason for me not to kill a player in the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the big thing. They need to have reasons for us not to kill. And then we also kind of need to get on each other's case. I don't know how, but like overall you kind of it's peer pressure almost, right? You don't go out into the verse and just murder somebody because if you told that story other people would be like, "Yo, dude, that's kind of messed up."
Yeah, what are you doing,
don't do
man?
that. Versus if they say, "Yeah, dude, nice. What was that, number 5 today?" And you're like, "Yeah."
That's when I wore his skin.
Oh, okay. That sounds like some Ninetales stuff. Actually, that sounds
Yeah.
more like Xenothreat stuff. They're pretty messy.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
let's talk about like the near future of combat, kind of what they've been talking about. So we know that they've got like the armor system right around the corner. They're rebalancing weapons. They're working on master modes, figuring out kind of roles for different types of fighters. What's something that you're more excited to see happen in the combat space in the next year or two?
I just really want to see this master mode introduced, man. I really want to see it change just because, again, of the desync. Like, even just fixing the desync would be huge. Just because, like, the issue right now is, like, even if you. I know jousting is a big issue for a lot of players. They don't know how to get close to these players and keep them close. When you understand neutralization and pips again, and you know how to push these ships and get into their vector, that becomes a lot easier. But the problem we face a lot in the PvP community right now is once we exceed like 600 miles or meters a second, um, those shots start to land less and less and less. So if they're going in a straight line at 1,200 meters a second, almost none of your shots connect. Even if you're right behind them, they just do not connect.
Hmm.
So this desync fix and this flight model speed change is huge. I think it's going to have people come together again and try to refigure PvP and the new system and how it's going to implement in the world. And hopefully, getting killed by one light fighter isn't going to be a thing anymore. Because if they don't have an interceptor with them, they won't be able to stop you from getting away.
So there's going to be a lot more emphasis, in your opinion, it sounds like, on not just the balance of combat, but the balance of like getting away or choosing to fight.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I mean, again, it's hard to say, right? But I'm hoping there is a skill for getting away because it's too easy right now. Um, and I know that sounds rough for a lot of people because I know some people find it very difficult. But the fact is, if you don't try to fight, if you literally point your ship in one direction, go super fast, and quantum away right away, they'll never get you. There's nothing they can do unless they have a mantis.
Yeah, I see. So that's the master modes are something that's coming up pretty soon. Planning on slowing down a lot of the combat. They've talked about that for the last couple of years. When it comes to the things that they used to do, they tried to kind of say, oh, if you're going too fast, your shots don't hit. If you're going too fast, like this and this doesn't function correctly, in a way to get us to slow down naturally instead of arbitrarily forcing
No,
us to slow down.
that's giving them too much credit. They're not that smart.
I mean,
I think all that's going on is the server's collapsing when we're going at those speeds.
well,
and
they
it's
came
like, I
out
don't
and
know where
said
these
it
bullets
though.
are.
What was it? 2 years ago, maybe, when they made those combat changes, and they said something like the way that the weapons were working changed with speed.
No, yeah, that was back in reference to the projectile speeds and the current flight models that we had at those times. No, yeah, in that case it was. They wanted to slow things down because, like I said before, flight combat was very, very fast paced.
Right, right.
It was exactly like Quake Wars. It was people going back and forth super fast and shooting like one shot, hitting it, and moving.
Hmm. And so now they're basically saying, hey, that didn't work. We're just going to force everyone to slow down.
Yeah, they
And
want even slower speeds.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that? Them just basically saying, oh well, your space speeds are now limited because we say so.
I think it's good. I mean, from a like realism standpoint, it doesn't make sense, right? But like we have to balance these things to make it fun. The current flight model is very hard and it takes a lot of learning. And hopefully the slower speeds makes it a little bit easier for everybody. Because what the issue right now and people don't feel they feel like they're in molasses, right? Like when they go in one direction and they try
Yes,
to change
absolutely.
directions. Yes, it feels like molasses because you still don't understand the relative motion that you're going through. And I think having slower speeds makes that easier to change at any given time without having to worry about which direction am I going, at what speed am I going.
So it kind of makes the fight actually feel faster.
Correct. It makes it feel faster. Because right now, what you can do is SCM lock, which means you turn on that little blue thing on your ship and you limit your speed. You can bring it down to like 300 meters a second
Yeah.
and try moving your ship around, and you'll see that it becomes much easier to change directions.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with this when the heat system starts to factor into like our thruster wear and tear. Just variable on top of variable, like the damage system, components, the heat system, power management, all this stuff. And we have such a basic form of fighting right now. It's going to be wildly different in a few years. Well, I say in a few years.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool, man. I think it's gonna turn out a little bit more like World War One fighter jets when they have the actual like, or maybe World War Two, when they have the actual physicalized damage. Just because it'll, like you're fighting and all of a sudden the guy just happens to land like a shot on your booster, and all of a sudden now you have to fight without a booster and things like that. Like I think that's gonna make the game very interesting.
Yeah.
Combat will feel more dynamic.
A lot more variability will be nice.
Yeah.
You don't look at a fight, judge the ship, and then call whether or not you're going to win or lose just based on what ship they're flying, which is nice.
Yeah, you could run into a Talon who is extremely fast at accelerating. You just focus his booster down, and all of a sudden he becomes useless.
Yeah. Let's talk about atmospheric combat, because that atmospheric flight is, and this is kind of a cool part of Star Citizen, wildly different from space flight. How do you change up your strategy when you're dogfighting somebody in atmosphere versus out in the
right now
vacuum?
It doesn't change much, believe it or not. Some people treat it like jets. It doesn't. It's the same as space. The only difference is we can't go as fast, and when we exceed a certain speed, our ship loses control. This is where actually something like toggling between your coupled and decoupled mode is beneficial. Usually in space, I fly decoupled. It's the best method right now for PvP. But in Atmo, it's actually where you want to start using coupled from time to time, depending on atmosphere.
You want to use coupled in Atmo or
yes,
decoupled?
In Atmo, you want to use coupled at higher speeds. At slower speeds, decouple. Once you start to exceed and you start to lose control, you turn on coupled, and it'll help you gain a little bit more control.
For a beginner, do you think that would be too much? Because you have to counteract gravity too, right?
Yeah. Well, once you learn decoupled, like it's huge. You have to learn decoupled off the bat, right? Like, I mean, if you're serious about PvP, if not, don't worry about it. But for people that want to learn PvP, decoupled is a must. Once you learn how to decouple, even atmosphere flight becomes easy, because when you're going fast in a straight line, even with gravity affecting you, your ship will want to stay a little bit higher. Like it won't just drag down. All you have to do is add a little bit of strafe in the direction that'll keep you from hitting the ground. And that becomes natural and easy once you do it enough.
Some of that lift that they say they're simulating.
Yeah, right now, okay, so like right now, atmosphere is kind of a joke. It's like I said, atmosphere flight is just like space, only we're flying through heavier air, and it barely does anything. Where it really changes is the things they want to bring. Like they want to add surface controls.
Right.
They want to make these ships that are designed for Atmo to suck in Atmo. And I think that's where things are really going to change. But till we get that, the current system is kind of an illusion.
Yeah, that's fair. We've been waiting for the control surfaces for a while. Honestly, something that I thought they were going to do shortly after they did that flight model change a couple years back, and we haven't
the first
seen
one,
it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were all expecting that, and we got like just air drag, which doesn't do anything to you.
And it's been pretty quiet since then. Like we've had the vehicle team talk on Star Citizen Live a few times since then. Nobody has really mentioned control surfaces except I think Rich Towler did over the summer, maybe. But yeah, other than that, we don't know much about that, because that I feel like is probably going to be around the same time we get the heat system and the thrusters, which changes VTOL mode again, which will be interesting. But it seems like it's still a while away.
Yeah, Connie's going to be really good again when that happens.
Yeah, so last kind of topic here. We've been talking a lot about dogfighting and light fighters, medium fighters, and heavy fighters. How about multi-crew ship combat? Do you do that very much?
Yeah, mostly in the Warden right now. Again, it's because of the
turrets.
messed up. Yeah, the
Yeah.
messed up turrets, it kind of sucks. But when it was working fine, like even a couple weeks ago, I don't know what they did recently that completely nuked it. Um, but they did something, and now it doesn't work too well. But multi-crew is really strong.
Hmm.
The thing is, you have to learn fundamentals in like a light fighter so you can understand movement a little bit better. Because once you learn a light fighter, heavy fighters become very easy, and any multi-crew becomes very easy. You have to know how to match these movements that the light fighters are trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Do you
It's kind of
and go ahead?
it's kind of like, just to add one thing to it, it's kind of like playing an MMO and you're like this really good mage. Well, the really good mage is good because he's played all the other classes and he knows what their weaknesses are. It's kind of the same in this.
Getting a better idea of the overall scope of it.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to you talking about coupled versus uncoupled mode. Learning uncoupled basically saves you whenever you are in a situation when you might need it.
Yeah, it's very important.
And I realized
Decoupled.
we didn't actually explain what that was. Can you explain to anybody who's listening what that is?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. For people who don't know, decoupled, all it does is when you turn it off, when you turn off coupled mode, you enter decoupled mode, and decoupled mode just keeps your ship from auto slowing down. So when you're in coupled mode, if you let go of any forward input or up, left, right strafe, whatever you're doing, your ship will automatically try to slow down and recenter itself. In decoupled mode, you don't have that, so it's easy to accelerate in one direction, turn the other way while your ship is still moving in that direction, and then change velocity in a different direction.
Feels very cool when you're good at it.
Yeah, it's very important because the fact that your ship isn't trying to slow you down all the time allows you to have more fine control of where you are in space.
Yeah, when people are when people are talking about how Star Citizen doesn't necessarily have realistic flight in space, what they're looking for is decoupled mode, because that basically gives you what you're looking for.
Even decoupled mode is a little bit more it's more balanced because we don't have decoupled mode for pitch and yaw. So like you don't have to counteract your aim. You only have to counteract your ship's movement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. I used to, when we had Delamar, I remember I used to go out there, and I don't know why, but for some reason I'd always like to fly decoupled around on top of Delamar. It was just, I guess because the atmosphere is so thin, basically just an asteroid. You go from space to surface in no time. But that was fun. I miss that place.
Yeah. You used to be able to establish like orbit patterns around planets too.
Yep. I remember seeing somebody do that.
Yeah, I don't know why they got rid of all that stuff. It's kind of weird. My guess is it had to do something with server and just like being too much.
The way I was at least thinking it went was that Delamar was just the only thing that was small enough but had gravity that we could do that with.
That could be it. Yeah, could be.
I hope that a lot of people talk about wanting orbital mechanics in the game. I don't need all like the crazy stuff, but I would like to see us be able to still do things like that, like decouple and just set your ship in orbit around a planet. Because imagine if you could do that and then log off, and like your ship would just maintain that. That's crazy, but your ship maintains that simulation. Really, you wake up and you're in a different place in orbit around the planet. Like that's a dream.
That would be a really neat mechanic.
Yeah, that would be cool. Well, John, how about to finish us off today for this conversation? I think this was a really good talk to get beginners more understanding of how combat works in the game and what they can kind of do to improve at it. But just to like draw the point home one more time, what are the main things that you would say people should focus on if they have absolutely zero experience with combat and they want to start to learn more about it? What are some things they can do?
Yeah, even if you don't want to do combat, which I get it, like most people don't care for that. I think everybody wants to be able to maneuver their ship, right? Like that's kind of important.
Yeah.
It's kind of the main aspect of the game. Learn how to orbit an asteroid. Again, you can check out my channel. I have a thing called combat maneuvers in there. That'll teach you how to do that, and it's fundamental to the game because it'll let you land easier. It'll make navigating around the verse much easier. You'll crash into things less often. It's an important skill to learn, and once you learn those things, if you're interested in learning more, you can progress from there and keep looking into different subjects and things of that nature.
Basically,
take it slow. Don't get overwhelmed.
Yeah, just get a small ship, go out to an asteroid, fly around it, and get comfortable doing things, feeling cool.
The difficult part is like, okay, first you start from one direction, right? But the difficult part becomes when you try to now continue that orbit while you're also rolling and changing directions on that rock. That's what makes it entertaining and fun.
Oh my gosh, mouse and keyboard. I hate flying like that with mouse and keyboard.
Yeah, it's brutal, man. And oh, for anybody who's like, I don't have a joystick, you don't need one. There's pilots who are they fly mouse and keyboard, and they're some of the best PvPers, if not the best. The first guy that comes to mind is Aiko. That guy whoops my ass all the time, and I'm a good pilot. And he's mouse and keyboard, and I'm on freaking Verpals. So it doesn't matter what you use. But if you're mouse and keyboard, you have to learn decoupled. A lot of things are not available to you as a coupled pilot in mouse and keyboard because the ship will always be fighting you, which makes mouse and keyboard even more difficult.
I used to have a HOTAS, and then I went back, and then I took an arrow to the knee. No, and then I went back to I went back to mouse and keyboard, and like I've gotten used to it. I can fly with it. Mainly it's utility purposes. I feel like landing, taking off, going different places. But once I get into combat, I feel like I have nothing. Like I'm already not a PC gamer. I came from Xbox. Star Citizen's really the only game I regularly play on the PC, even still. So
Yeah.
when it comes to like quick, high octane flying around, the ground is 10 feet away from you, laser shots are flying past your face, the alarms going off. There's 30 people in chat yelling at me, I'm going to die. Like my fingers don't do the right thing. And trying to
Yeah.
fight on mouse and keyboard is infuriating for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes with time, man. It's
Yeah,
just putting in the
definitely.
time and making it fun. Like, like I learned not just by doing PvP because that gets boring, like just fighting people all the time.
Hmm.
I'm not an AC warrior. I don't care for it. And I still I've gotten to the point where um I'm better at combat than most AC pilots. I'm still far from the best. The best are the people who go in there and they grind AC all the time. Um, but when you learn things in the game little by little, you enjoy it and you get better at it with time. Like I a lot of what I did in the beginning was I just went to planets doing box delivery missions,
Hmm.
and I would just try to skim the ground in decoupled mode or things like that. And I would give myself little challenges little by little to learn these mechanics in a way that was fun to me while I played the game. Like I used to mine in coupled mode, and then I tried mining in decoupled mode and things like that, just making it difficult little by little.
Yeah. I mean, now is the time to experiment. Nothing
Yeah.
matters. Most of the people who are going to be playing this game when it goes live haven't even bought it yet. So
Yeah, yeah.
like it's now is the time to kind of learn those sorts of things. I think once master modes comes in, I'm going to start to probably spend like 1 day a week kind of practicing on combat stuff. Definitely want to link up with you a few times out in the verse and see if we could do some practice together. We talked about it, just haven't gotten the time, but
Yeah, man, I'm always available. Like, dude, like I've told you, like, but just make it a part of your stream, man. I think people will enjoy
yeah.
watching you learn the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I keep putting it off until I get some sticks, dude. I don't want to learn mouse and keyboard, but I should. I always tell
That's why.
people,
You can do controller. It's not. It's more enjoyable experience in my opinion than mouse and
"Oh,
keyboard.
really?
It's not as good as sticks, but you can do controller.
Huh, okay. That's good to know. I'm pretty sure I've got one around here somewhere."
Yeah.
But at the same time, I sit there and I'm like, I don't want to do mouse and keyboard, but I always tell people, learn the game on mouse and keyboard because you might find yourself not in front of your setup and playing the game sometime, and you don't want to just be floundering around like, "Oh, I don't do this. This is
Yeah, that's
not as
true.
normal as
Yeah.
normal." So like I think I should probably learn on mouse and keyboard, but we'll figure something out. We'll get a time to go
Yeah.
out. All right, man. Well, I guess to close us out, two things. First, I want to hear at least one thing that you are really looking forward. It doesn't have to be combat related, just really looking forward to coming to Star Citizen soon. And then after that, once again, let the people know. Obviously, we've been talking all about what kind of content you do, but where they can find it and maybe when you post videos or something like that.
Yeah. Like I said, well, first, I'm excited as heck, and I'm sure a lot of people here are. The Corsair. Just we're a few weeks away, hopefully.
That's an easy one,
Hopefully
man.
we're there.
Usually people are like, "Oh, I'm really pumped because we're gonna get like salvage and we're gonna get the server meshing or like some big thing." You're just like, give me that Corsair. We know
I
it's
want the
coming."
Corsair, bro.
Yeah.
I want that firepower.
Are you okay? So you are a fighter, but the Corsair is a big ship. Are you kind of into that class ships outside of your
No,
combat focus?
I like heavy fighters the most. I like a little bit in between. I like maneuverability, but also having a lot of firepower. Corsair is gonna be crap for PvP, I think,
Oh,
unless
yeah.
you're
I
going
mean,
against other big ships.
I wouldn't
But
even
I think
expect it for that.
yeah, but I think it's gonna be probably the best PvE ship.
Okay, so you're
for now at least.
you're looking at it purely from the combat perspective. You're not. It's not because it's like multi-crew or a certain size or anything. Just because it's got a lot of guns.
Well, it's going to be my future go-to ship. I think it's going to be great for exploration. I wanted something that can explore but have a little bit of everything.
There it
And
is.
that
Exploration.
ship seems to
Okay.
be right there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Because I was gonna say, what about the Redeemer?
Nah, fuck the Redeemer. I hate that thing.
That's got so many guns though.
Yeah, it's so slow though. I think they're gonna keep it slow too. I think it's going to be a heavy fighter killer in the future. Maybe, maybe not. Actually, no. I take that back. I think it'll just be a capital ship killer.
It seems like
I
the
think
kind
heavy
of
fighters.
ship you'd have like kind of over the battlefield and ground battles, you know, like something that could be fighting, shooting at the ground, shooting in the air, just kind of area dominance
Yeah.
kind of ship.
Yeah, it would be very good for that. I think it's only struggles in the future of combat like that would probably be torpedoes.
Good point. Good point. Very decisive ship though. That thing, jeez, that thing polarized the crap out of the community, and I love
Yeah.
that. I love that people are kind of
I love that
crazy
ship.
about
I
which
think-
ships is good and which aren't.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with that ship. I think it was a community ship too, right? So it was
Yeah.
designed by a certain person. I thought they did a great job on it. I think the way they made the engine is very unique and it just stands out.
Yeah, yeah. Cool, man. Well, where else can they find your stuff?
Yeah, check me out on YouTube, JoHnathan Winters. And then, like I said, I do a lot of combat stuff on there. I have playlists available that'll show you like a playlist for everything I've made: cinematics, combat tutorials, gameplay, things like that. And everything like I mostly bring that up for the combat tutorials. If you open the playlist in there, everything is structured in an order that will teach you from beginning to future.
Got your combat teacher right there. Well, thank you again, John, for joining me for this episode. Fantastic talk. I think people, myself included, need a lot of encouragement to get started in combat. We all see the writing on the wall. This is going to be a dangerous game. It's not going to be separated servers. It's not going to be closed off to PvP. And at some point, people will have to accept that they might have to shoot a gun every once in a while. So
Yeah.
appreciate people like you who are willing to go out there and try and help teach people in the best and honestly most visual ways they can. Your visual B-roll and content on your channel is amazing. So thank you
Yeah,
for that.
thanks, man.
And thanks for
Thanks.
joining us.
No, pleasure. It was great being here, man.
Cool. And for anybody who is watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite audio platform, thank you so much. Consider leaving a review or a little thumbs up and maybe a comment. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, ask some questions, and just say hi. And for anybody who is here live, thank you so much. All supporters are able to check this show out live and take part in a Q&A afterwards where we get to chat and talk and ask a couple more questions. So thank you for supporting everything we do here. Thanks for coming to it live. And once again, a thanks to everybody involved. I'll see you all next week.